Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. All right, guys. Very excited for today's episode. This is my first, Emily was just telling me, like, this is her first podcast she's ever been on. This is my first interview of a podcast that I've ever done before. Um, the good news is that Emily, who I have on the pod today, she is our head of customer success at Patch. She's been working with us now for, it's been a while now. I feel like it's been like 5 years since you've been at Patch,
Yeah,
Emily, to be totally honest with you.
I know. I think it's been like
Uh,
7 months.
yeah, exactly.
Closing
Okay,
in on a year.
yeah, she's been with us for 7 months, and her and I can shoot the shit about stuff for hours. So I think this is going to be much more of a conversational style. But I wanted to bring Emily on because she has a super unique background. I think a lot of the clinic owners that are listening to the pod will resonate with her story, and I think take a lot away from kind of her background. And I think it's whenever like we have a new staff member come on board, because Emily's the one who trains up like all of our customer success and marketing people when they come on with Patch. And I always like to tell the story about Emily because Emily and I have known each other for a while,
Yeah.
way before Patch. And I actually, because Emily's based in Boston, and obviously my clinic, Ripple, was in Boston. And Emily applied for one of our jobs at one of our open staff PT jobs, and it was hilarious. Like, she came in, she was awesome. She hit it off with the staff, and her and I think we just grabbed coffee. We were sitting outside, and we didn't talk about the PT role at all. We just talked about like stuff outside of physical therapy. And like I was just like starting Patch at this time too. And I think like I was like, she's never gonna take this job. We offered it to her and she didn't take the job. But I kind of knew that I was like, I think I'm gonna start this marketing company. I think she's gonna be perfect for something like that. So yeah, that's a long-winded introduction for Emily. So Emily, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I think you hit the nail right on the head, kind of in terms of our origin story, how we met. And it's really funny looking back on it, honestly, thinking
Yeah.
about how we got here today.
Super funny. Yeah, super funny. Like I said, I was like, I'm gonna hire her like at some point. I don't know when or where that's gonna be.
Yeah.
But give us a bit of a background on like, okay, where did you go to school? What did the job out of school look like? And then we can kind of move into like your transition to like a more non-clinical role. But give us like your PT background first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think how I got into the PT world in general is like kind of funny. I actually want to go into sports management like so bad. And my dream job was to be the manager of the Red Sox. And
Nice. Me too.
yeah, it sounded like a sweet gig. And I was like, if I get that job, I'll know I've made it. And like I would preach that to my parents all day long. And when I told my dad, like, that's what I want to go to college for, he's like, all right, well, maybe we should have like a little backup plan. Like, there is only one manager of the Red Sox. Like, if that doesn't work out, what do you want to do? And I was like, I just want to work with like athletes. Like, I was an athlete. That was kind of my dream. And he's like, how about physical therapy? And I was like, I don't know. No, like that did not sound interesting to me. Also, as like a high school girl, like anything your parents suggest, you just don't want to do. But he ended up getting in cahoots with my AP biology teacher, who was like a really big role model for me. And his cousin owned his own PT clinic. And it actually was like a very small cash-based PT clinic in Rhode Island. And I ended up doing my senior project there and I shadowed him and I fell in love with the job. I thought it was so cool that he got to one get to know his patients. Like he was seeing the same people routinely. He knew everything about them, from their kids' names, what their jobs were, what their daily routine is, what they like to do. And that's so rare in the healthcare field that any type of provider gets to have that relationship, because usually you're only going to doctors, dentists, etc. when you're sick, or like once a year for an annual checkup, and they don't know anything about you. So not only did I like that, but I liked how it was like an active job. It wasn't like behind a desk. It was talking to people and relationship building, um, which is funny because that's a lot of what I get to do now at Patch too, which is cool. So after that, I was like, you know what? I actually think I want to go into physical therapy. This seems awesome. And I applied. I went to Quinnipiac. They had a really cool like 3+3 or 4+3 program. So from undergrad all the way through grad school, that's where I was. And then upon graduating from PT school, it was COVID. So I actually had a really hard time finding my first job. I ended up
Yeah.
working for
Wow.
yeah, it was crazy. No one was hiring unless you were in a hospital, which I knew I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And I took a per diem job at a pretty big chain over in the South Shore of Massachusetts. And long story short, just wasn't paying the bills because there were no customers because it was COVID.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, so I pivoted. I had a few like outpatient PT jobs. And really, I had an opportunity to work for this really great clinic. Am I allowed to name drop?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't see why not.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I worked for Boston PT and Wellness, and it's a slower growing chain in Massachusetts, in the suburbs of Boston. And like that, their clinic owner, Dave, he's a Quinnipiac alumni himself, just like really valued pouring into his therapists and like giving them opportunities to focus on other interests outside of PT. So he allowed me to do a lot of con eds surrounding like clinical informatics, data science. I even took a coding course, management courses, and I really realized that a lot of my interests outside of PT like lied within like an operations and data field. Um, and so I'm very thankful for him for that opportunity. But I pivoted shortly after that role into my first startup, which was a PT based startup. I was a lead physical therapist and like a clinical operations associate. So I was helping not only build up the PT presence on the virtual side of things, but also kind of doing some stuff similar to what I do at Patch Now, training new PTs. I was helping build out some of their back end systems. And that was really great. Unfortunately, left that job because I had to relocate. And during that transition was when I interviewed at Ripple. Ended up at another startup where I was more of like a director of clinical operations. And then Jeremy came along and brought me on board to Patch. So here I am.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a cool story, and I think like there's lots of different things to unpack there too. But I think like first off, like the fact that you had almost like a school to career with like a cash like the OG cash based physical therapist back then, right?
Yeah.
Like who was doing cash based PT back then? Like that's
No
so
one.
awesome to hear that you're doing it back then. But yeah, I know the guys at Boston PT Wellness like super well. They are like one of the good eggs out there too, or they're pushing the like industry forward. I knew Zach Gabor really well because as I was coming up in Boston too, like they were the one of the ones that were again just like leading more of this like holistic charge on the physical therapy world. And I thought like I resonated with them of you guys are doing things a little bit differently here. There's a strength and conditioning coach. There's actually like barbells here. Like this is
Yeah.
awesome to see. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Like as your staff physical therapist there and you're kind of interested in a little bit more on like the data analytics side of things, like how did that come about? Was that just like where did you feel like okay, I want a little bit more out of my PT role? Like were you just taking an initiative there? Like how did that kind of like mindset shift start for you?
Yeah. So I guess I'm someone who really doesn't like being stagnant. And unfortunately, in the PT world, there isn't much upward trajectory in terms of your career. It's kind of like you go into your job as a physical therapist, you kind of stay a PT, you can become a senior PT if you're lucky, which is essentially still a PT just with a cooler title and not really that much of a pay difference. And then you can become a clinic director, which is probably the highest level you can go if you don't opt to leave and go start your own clinic or franchise a clinic somewhere. Which again, you're still in essence being a treating therapist. Now you just get some admin work on top of it. And that to me was such a ceiling that I was not comfortable with. And I wanted to do more and have opportunities to grow in my career. So that's when I was trying to see like what my other interests would be. And I actually took like a bunch of like surveys online to see like what I would be good at and talked to a bunch of people I know who had left the clinical field to see what they were doing and ultimately ended on like more data analytics and operations type stuff. So from there, I was like, how can I upskill myself to potentially move into a role like that in the future? And so I took a lot of courses on Coursera. Harvard Business School has great courses. I actually took one of their coding courses a while back. So just learning as much as I could and networking as much as I could to, again, like learn about what's out there, learn about other people's pathways. And that's ultimately what ended up in me getting like my first startup job was just networking.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? And I think there's a lot of you out there in the PT world too, where they're doing a lot more on like the self-education side of things. And, I would assume new grads now are coming out with like some AI background because they
Yeah.
used it in school. And and I know like a lot of the clinic owners that we work with, especially, they're a little like hesitant to hire somebody like you because it's like, like, are you going to come in here and like try to like steal all of my patients from me and go and try to do your own thing because you're so
Mhm.
motivated and you're so entrepreneurial? Like, so my question to you is like, I love hiring people like you because that's what I want. Like going to war with me every day. Like that's I want to like, and we did that at Ripple too. Like, we had a couple PTs that were just badass and they were going out and they're getting their own patients. And I think that scares a lot of clinic owners off. So like knowing that that is you and you are, at one point going out there and looking for some of the PT jobs, like what would be some advice that you would give to clinic owners of like, okay, you've got this like strong-headed, but like a little bit more like entrepreneurial. They're going to try to do their own thing. They're going to take courses on their own. Like, what can a clinic owner do to entice you to grow and scale at that clinic?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, something that I've grown to appreciate when I'm like looking for jobs and like a boss is someone who like wants to see you grow and isn't trying to hold you back. Because I've definitely worked for clinic owners who are like, I'll give you Con Ed money to like keep your license, but I'm gonna give you like the bare minimum and like that's it. As long as you keep your license and stay here and meet productivity standards, like that's pretty much all I'm gonna make sure you do. And that to me is just like not very enticing. I think what I was afforded the opportunity to do, and I think the Boston PT and Wellness Clinic owner did really well. I think you do this really well, is one, like learning your staff therapist's interests, and like really getting to know them as a person because there is a lot of like non-clinical skill sets that can be beneficial to you in your clinic. Like when I was interested in data analytics, I sold that to Dave as like, I will come in here and go through our EHR and give you the data that you need so that we can like make more informative decisions about how we're running our practice data. And he's like,
Oh.
sick. I don't have anybody who does that right now. And we have all this data just sitting there. Like, absolutely. So if I think one, if you can see the potential for that non-clinical skill to help you out as a business owner, like you should absolutely like open that door for your staff members and like entice them to help you build your practice out more. Cause then that also gives them buy-in into like, I'm helping build out the system. I want to stay on here longer to see how that plays out. Um, and that's just something I think would be helpful. If more clinic owners were doing it, I think there'd be just better retention of PTs everywhere.
Yeah. It's almost like it's like pseudo skin in the game almost of like, okay, like, yeah, like I want you to take this project and run with it, right? And it's like, okay, now you feel like this like data analytics project that I've been working on, it's my baby. Like I don't need to own the clinic. I don't want all that responsibility
Yeah.
and all that stuff. Like, but like you have a big part in terms of like what we're doing with this thing moving forward and how we're going to help it grow. So yeah, I think a lot of clinic owners, can learn a ton from that too. Of if you have this like, again, very forward thinking physical therapist on your plate, like I wouldn't shy away from hiring that person because like if you foster that correctly, they can really like help your clinic grow. Um, Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk about like these other like tech specific PT jobs that you took. But we don't need to name the company or anything that you were working at there, but I'm actually very intrigued on like how are they doing things that's a little bit different. Obviously, you're coming from the insurance world. We work with, a high majority of the clinics that we work with are cash based. Like, what was this like online sector doing, and like, what do you think they were doing well, and what weren't they doing well?
Yeah, really good question. So each role that I held, each company was a little bit different. I would say both of my startups I worked at prior to Patch did definitely try to push for like the virtual PT side of things in some capacity, which I love personally. I think it expands access to PT in like rural areas where they may not be able to get to a clinic in a timely manner or like routinely just because it's an hour away. Also for people who need flexibility, like there is a need and a place for virtual PT. I agree it's not for everybody, but I think there's a market there. And the issue we run into is obviously like with insurance, there's a barrier of like what's covered, what's not. And unfortunately, like the further we move away from COVID, the less coverage there is for those types of services. But I think that's where cash-based PT can come in and like still offer those services and give great quality care for the right people, because more people in like the public sector are like less able to do that now. So we were really pushing for that. Additionally, they were pushing for any sort of like way to help make home exercise programs more automated, more accessible, more gamified. So as we know, compliance for patients is just like honestly a nightmare when it comes to like
non-existent.
giving
Yeah,
them,
right. Yeah.
yeah, like a home exercise program. Half the people don't do it. Half of them start doing it and they do it really well and then it drops off. So it's like there's so much buzz around like what that can look like. AI, using AI to help like track client progress to like again entice them in any way they can. And so part of my role was helping brainstorm systems, testing those systems out with our patients and with our therapists, getting feedback, and then collecting data and like really presenting that to like C-suite level people and like internal stakeholders as appropriate.
How did it work? Like, did you guys see like an increased compliance with the like on the app side of things? 'Cause I think like a lot of the again the clinics that we work with, they try to layer on this like True Coach or the online programming, and it worked really well for us at Ripple. Like, just
Yeah.
it kind of did a couple different things of like it built in a little bit more compliance on the home exercise program, but it also allowed for us to like continue to get people to come in because there's like a programming aspect to what we're doing. So yeah, on the data side of things, did it increase like compliance there? It's like, did you guys start to see some like good results with it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think in order to like get patient buy-in specifically, it's something you almost have to introduce like right off the bat is like this is just going to be part of your plan is like using this platform. This is how we're going to use it. I think there's a lot to be said too of like if patients are able to communicate with you through the platform because we see this at Patch like clients like to have access to you like when they want, not only just during that like one-on-one like visit time that they have. So to be able to open up the door to have more frequent communications, like that in and of itself helped with like compliance within like an external application. Um, I think what was also just like really great is it gave as a therapist, like it's really hard to see and know what your patients are doing at home because they could tell you one thing and like objectively you can kind of see some of that progress in the testing you're doing in the clinic. But like for them to be able to tell you like I did this today or like send a video of like this is my squat today, like do you notice anything funky going on? I think it just helps make a more comprehensive and cohesive treatment plan, which once clients start to feel that and see that in terms of results, it's great for buy-in. So yeah.
So yeah, and I think like I think it's cool. I think we're gonna see it this year, especially with the again with the clinics that we work with in Patch. Of there's gonna be another layer to what people are adding on to like the cash world's great where you're doing the one-on-one 60-minute session. That's awesome, but I do think there's going to be another almost like tech layer added to all this stuff where yeah, we're
Yeah.
doing like the online programming, but I think something is going to come out, some sort of tool that people can use where you like you said you can do like, all right, just take a quick video of your squat and let's see what's going on with your knee, and then you can provide real-time feedback there. It was crazy. I went to the eye doctors 2 days ago,
Mhm.
and my whole eye exam was with like an Oculus like VR glasses on. I was like, this is
Oh,
insane. Like,
that's sick.
when did this change? Like, but it
Yeah.
was just yeah, it was really cool. Of like, I could have done this sitting at home if I wanted to. Like, I think.
Oh, definitely.
Uh, so those things are going to change a ton.
Hmm.
Okay, cool. Well, talk to me more about, obviously like your PT role, right? Let's go back to just like you on the PT side of things. You worked in like the traditional like insurance-based clinics. Obviously, like Boston PT Wellness, they're, pushing that agenda forward, but still a little bit constrained there. You're now
Hmm.
working with a ton of cash clinics. Like, what is the big differences you're seeing with those? And like, what do you think cash clinics are doing well, that, maybe traditional insurance clinics aren't?
Yeah. I mean, I think this one speaks for itself, and all of the cash-based like clinic owners are going to be able to attest to this, but the quality of care you get at a cash clinic is just like it's night and day. When you're at an insurance clinic, just the volume of patients you have to see to make a few bucks is insane, which I think isn't fair to one, the therapists who are getting burnt out, and then two, for the patients who like get maybe 5 minutes of actual one-to-one FaceTime with their therapist before they get stuffed in a corner with an aide somewhere to like do some unsupervised exercises. Um, it's insane. So if I like whenever I have family members now who need physical therapy, I either tried to provide it myself, or I like tell them to go to a cash clinic because I'm like insurance is not worth it. Plus with copays and everything now too, you're already paying usually something out of pocket to go there. You might as well put that money towards a much better experience. Um, I think also in terms of like retention, when I think of my friends that I graduated PT school with and who's at cash-based clinics versus insurance-based clinics, pretty much everyone I know who's at a cash-based clinic has been there for like a few years. Like they love it. They feel like they have a better work-life balance. Whereas my friends who work at insurance-based clinics, usually they're on travel contracts. So again, they're just bopping in and out of places, or they're changing jobs every like 12 to 18 months because they're just burnt out and they need something fresh. So I see a lot of benefit in cash-based clinics. I think it's the future for PTs because the insurance model is not sustainable. And also to justify the amount of money we spend on our degrees, like to get paid that poorly just because insurance isn't paying the clinic enough to be able to pay you better, it's pretty shitty. So
Yeah, totally. And I think like I have, friends and obviously we have a ton of people in the PT world now too. And that's kind of like where they're at, unfortunately, is, the ones it's a stable job, sure. Like you kind of clock in, clock out. Maybe you're doing documentation on the weekends, but I think that's the biggest complaint that I hear from the people that I know that are in the traditional insurance clinics that they're working at is there's really no upward mobility. They can't really like
yeah.
flex their skills as they want to. Maybe they take a couple con ed courses, and I think it brings up a good point for cash clinics where and I think we did this quite well at Ripple too, where like if you come on as a staff PT, there is like this like almost like this journey here. It's like you could start as this staff PT. We have this like almost like a helicopter level like lead physical therapist that kind of oversees the clinic there, and then as we grow to multiple clinics, there's, clinic director and clined head. And, we had somebody that was like our head of strength and conditioning. So they did all the strength and conditioning side of things. So I think that's what, especially on the cash clinic side of things, where, I think it's one of the biggest bottlenecks right now is hiring and people can't hire. And I think like mapping that plan out for new PTs that are coming on board, if they know like, yeah, okay, this might be like a 5 or 6 year program, but that really stops them from hopping from job
Yeah.
to job as well. So yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts of, now knowing all these cash clinics as a former PT, like what would you want that upper mobility to look like in a perfect world? Like what is that? If you're going to be at a clinic for 10 years, help it grow, like what does that path look like for you?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I actually, as you were talking that through, I remember very clearly like the job offer outlined to me by Ripple and kind of that tiered approach that you had laid out. And it gave me a moment of pause because I'd never seen anything like that from any of, again, the other clinics I had worked for or interviewed at. And it really made me feel like there is opportunity for growth here. There's opportunity to be here long term, which is never something I had thought about when applying to, again, like an insurance-based clinic or something like that. I think when I think about what that looks like, I think it could be a few things. I think it's good to have options because not every PT is necessarily interested in a leadership role. So showing potentially a few different pathways of like, if you want a leadership role, like here's the tier to get you to be clinic director or like head of clinical success for the company as a whole. Also like here's a different path you could take if you want to venture down to having like your own strength and conditioning side of the practice where maybe you do like half of your day is PT clients, half of your day is strength and conditioning clients, and like how can that work out? So I think just one being able to have flexibility in like what those tiers look like, especially if you're tailoring a job offer to someone you really like, if you know they have certain interests, take time to craft that pathway out to something they specifically would be interested in. And two, like be open to feedback. If someone comes back to you and is like, hey, this is like the limitations I see with this job offer. Like, are you open to maybe offering me some more Con Ed money so I can explore other opportunities? Or maybe offering me some mentoring opportunities so I can learn different parts of the business that maybe I don't know I'm interested in yet. Those I think go a long way in showing your potential staff PTs that you really care about them and helping entice them to get them on board. And that would differentiate you from a lot of things that are out there right now.
Yeah, it's just such good advice. And I think I kind of did that like subconsciously, to be honest with you, at Ripple, but it was because I knew like I was thinking about the longevity side and like what would I want with this role too. But yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
just like sitting down with like, a potential staff member or a brand new staff member and just be like, okay, listen, like we've got to get through like 90 days worth of like just like onboarding. I gotta make sure you're a good PT. We got to make sure that this is gonna work here
Yeah.
first. But then like once that, you kind of get through that phase and you know that they're going to be a fit at the clinic, it's like, okay, like what do you want to do? Like what type of like people do you want to see? What do you want this to look like? And we always did this exercise at Ripple where we basically mapped out like our next 1 year, 5 year, 10 years. And then it's like, what do you want this to actually look like? And I think again, as a clinic owner, it's very interesting of like, oh, I would have never even thought that you would want to be interested. I remember we had a staff PT, and he wanted to become like a professor. I was like, I would have never guessed that. But it's like, unless I asked that question, then, I would never like be able to tee you up with somebody over at Northeastern or anything along those lines. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think, it's with the clinic director that I had at Ripple who ended up, purchasing part of Ripple when I sold. I think if you would have asked her too back then, like she was that person where like she just wanted to be a really fucking good clinician and that's what she wanted to lean into. She didn't really want anything on the business side of things, but obviously that evolves over time. And again, I think for clinic owners understanding, that, if you continue having that conversation, you keep people in the right place. And I think we ended up doing a good job with that at Ripple and we didn't have too much turnover because we provided a lot of that. It's, if you want to see a bunch of soccer players, well, all right, like where's the club soccer team around here and how do we get in front of them? And like, let me help you do that. Or, we had a PT where they were really into winter sports and I was too. So this is a bit self-serving, but so we went and, we started the ski club and we went to Burton and we did events there. So like, you've got to do stuff to help your staff and, an extra $10,000 a year, like that the difference between those two is like somebody's gonna rather have like a really good work experience and like be in front of the people that they actually want. I think at least. So I think it's a really good point that you bring up there. And yeah, I think that's how clinic owners have to look at it.
Oh, 100%. And I think to your point too, it's like looking at your staff PTs as like an investment, not just someone you need to hire to get by on the day to day. Because I think just echoing what you said about what you did for your PTs at Ripple, all of those people that you invested in ended up giving you so much back to your business to help grow, to get more leads in the door, like do all those good things. So if people are not burnt out and tired and feeling like they're at a dead end job, the business is going to reflect that. And I think just grow tenfold.
All right, well, let's talk about that burnout then, because there's
Yeah.
obviously PTs out there that are burning out, and
Mhm.
I don't know if maybe you would consider yourself like burnt out of PT, but obviously like looking into like these more like non-clinical roles, and obviously I've been looking into this a little bit more now that we have Patch. We've hired a lot of these like non-clinical PTs. My jaw hit the floor when I saw this non-clinical PTOT Facebook group that has like 70,000 people in
Insane.
it. It's
Yeah.
crazy. It's
Huge.
absolutely crazy. But like, yeah, what do you think about like that trend of people like kind of moving out of, their, it's not even PTs, right? It's nurses, it's PA. I have a couple PA buddies that like aren't PAs anymore. Yeah, give me your thoughts on that.
My first thoughts are I love it. It's not surprising, but it's also really sad because I think it's a testament to how far our healthcare system has fallen. And that's a conversation for another day. But I do think that in terms of what clinicians are looking for, whether you're in like the hospital system, whether you're a PT, PA, et cetera, they want opportunities to grow, to learn, to do new things. Like, no, there are very few people I think who like to just be doing the same thing day in and day out for the rest of their life. And unfortunately, like in a lot of healthcare settings, that's what it feels like. It's like you're going in, you're treating patients, doing your documentation, going home, getting up, doing it all over again. Um, so I think this like expansion into like the non-clinical sector is really cool because it's showcasing one, the other skill sets that healthcare providers have outside of just direct patient care. I know when I went to PT school, the only thing we learned about in terms of a profession is obviously being a PT. And then if you don't want to be a PT, you could always go and be a professor. And it's like, all right, if those are my only two options. Like that also feels very like restrictive. But I know like in PT school, I learned a ton about like just organization, time management, leadership, persuasion, like negotiating skills through like again, if you think about trying to convince a patient to do a home exercise program, a lot of that is getting down to their level and like explaining things on a base level and convincing them why this is beneficial for them. Um, you learn a lot about data upkeep, even just doing research because a lot of the exercises that you should be doing with patients should be evidence-based, but like what goes into developing that evidence. So there are these bits and pieces in academia that you learn, but you don't always get to put into practice being just a routine PT, but you can take that into like a ton of non-clinical jobs. So I really love like the non-clinical PT. I follow them religiously. I subscribe to their newsletter. I think they do a great job of showcasing the plethora of opportunities that are out there because it's not just like going into insurance or like you can go into academia. Like there are people doing so many cool things at startups. I saw a recent spotlight where someone was working for Nike. Like sky's kind of the limit. And I think it's time that like clinicians know that.
Totally. And I think like, because again, like we've hired a couple of them obviously, and I ran a clinic too. Like PTs are awesome hires. Like they're detail oriented, they're organized, they
Mhm.
give a shit about everybody, which you just can't find that in the normal workforce there. So again, yeah, I think it's, obviously the trend will continue for sure, but I do think like it's kind of like a later in career type thing for most people. And I think that's where, again, clinic owners who are listening to this, I think like, it's kind of inevitable. I think it's one of those things that like, again, like you said, like nobody's going to work for you for the rest of their life until you kind of move on, unless you like actually, oh no, getting a phone call.
No.
um and you get somebody to actually like buy in. I think that's the other side of it, is like you either someone's going to go like this kind of non-clinical route, or there's like this path to like, okay, you're eventually going to be like a partner in this whole thing too. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. We obviously have one of our staff members, KJ, who will definitely be on the pod coming up soon. She was a clinic owner, now works with us. I think it's a natural transition for a lot of people, and not something to be worried about. I think, kind of the point of all of this stuff, right, is on the hiring side of things, there are going to be people that are going to have interests other than, just the physical therapy side of things. I think that's a really good thing. I think those are the people that you want in your camp. I think those are the people that work best in the cash world as well. And I don't think you actually ended up working at a cash clinic, but you
Oh.
would have crushed it there. You would have done really, really well. And I think like, that's again why I want to have you on the pod and kind of highlight your stories, because I do think a lot of clinic owners will shy away from someone that has just a little bit more motivation than just coming in and seeing patients. And I think that's a really good thing. I think we want to nurture those people. So uh, I think last thing from you that I'll ask you is, you've been doing 7 months worth of CRM building and organization in the background. Give me your plug for why clinics need a CRM and why this is important.
Oh my gosh, why don't they? I mean, I think at the end of the day, clinic owners, you guys do a lot. You focus on a lot of things, and a lot of you are still very much involved in patient care. But having a CRM that is going to help you like nurture leads and figure out where to focus your time and your energy based on the data that it's pulling for you is invaluable. Because if you do only have like 5 minutes, 10 minutes out of your day to dedicate to like strategizing on your business efforts, making sure you have a CRM that's giving you information to support the decisions that you're going to end up making is just going to be a night and day difference in it to like a clinic that really succeeds and shines and grows, and compared to like a clinic that's mediocre and potentially doesn't do well. So I think we've seen like a really good we've seen really good results from our clinics who have their CRM set up properly and use it consistently. And I'm excited to kind of push that for clinic owners going forward because I think it's just going to benefit them long term.
Totally, 100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. It's the backbone of your business. It's just something that you need to have. Emily, I appreciate you coming on. This is super fun. We'll catch up again in another 3 months, 6 months, and see how the progression is going and what trends you're seeing in the PT world on this side of the fence. And we can continue to give clinic owners a lot of really good advice. So this is awesome. I appreciate you coming on. And yeah, if you guys want to chat with Emily more, she's obviously a big part of what we're doing here at Patch. Definitely check us out, thepatchsystem.com. And I will talk to you guys next episode.
Sweet. Thanks for having me.